All right, y'all. Thanks for being here with us again this week. You're here with Bobby and Graham, and we're excited to dive into some really fun topics. We shared these on X before we hopped on, but are you?
Sorry, you cut out a little bit there, Bobby. But yeah, no, great to see you. And yeah, you want to jump? Can you repeat what you said? You want to jump into the first one?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and dive in. One big announcement that I thought was million led by Tether.
Hmm.
This was really neat because they have tap to pay for 100 million merchants. And it looks like they're going to be allowing people to bring their own wallets into their app to make it even more non-custodial, which was pretty neat to see. But it feels like this is the year of get on zero with what Fold's doing, updating their app and more investment into this. But pretty cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I agree. I think it's interesting to see. I think Tether is an interesting one to kind of participate in things like this. And so I think it's very interesting to see. I agree that there's more and more people kind of. I think the reach in terms of numbers of people, that have access to these services is growing, which is great. And so we'll see. Hopefully that things like this app, start to adopt things like Lightning and some other Bitcoin tech as we see them roll out. Hopefully this investment from Tether, which has, historically, they're obviously a stablecoin organization, but working on doing more things along those lines, I think will be super interesting to see.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really curious because some of these applications, like these are the ones that have the most users right now. Like Fold's had some incredible growth. Obviously, Ubit is like doing well, and they've got direct ability for people to pay these merchants, and it sounds like whatever crypto they want. Obviously we're building Bitcoin, but given the ability for merchants to receive dollars and allow the consumer to pay in whatever they want, that's one of the best things that could be happening, at least at this phase, to allow to be used as a medium of exchange. I know there's a lot of debaters saying it's a pet rock still, but it really seems like the medium of exchange ability is totally here.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I agree, and I think that it's only going to be. I think we're in the first inning of it kind of being here as well. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity to go still. So yeah, it's great to see these kinds of advancements and things coming online to make it more usable in the real world, which I think is which is great. Yeah, the whole pet rock thing, just kind of putting that to rest.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, good stuff. This is really exciting to see. Congrats to them.
Yeah.
We also had on the list here the cashew address and cashew mints. For those who didn't read about this, some of the really cool highlights is it's Nostr focused, which is pretty sweet. It's built with that in mind. So your public address is already a cashew address, but there's a lot of privacy benefits in being able to receive payments when offline, where rather than the payment stuck and pending, it actually is in an e-token, a cashew token. But can you kind of maybe explain practically like what this is for those listening?
Yeah, basically, I mean, so what cashew? You got to start with kind of what is cashew, and cashew is it's a the kind of implementing Chaumian eCash in a custodial way. So you think there's things like Fedimint, Federation, yeah, Fedimint and like Fedi and all those kind of things, which is uses Chaumian eCash but does it in a federated way. So there's no kind of single point of failure or one person holding the keys to all Bitcoin. Cashew is kind of like the eCash version of it without the federation. So it's a single person or single entity that holds all access to all funds. So very much like an exchange or something like that. So it is 100% custodial. So make sure like that's kind of out there and known that this is 100% custodial. The interesting part of this specifically is that they're kind of beefing up the abilities of what Cashew can do. So adding things like Lightning Address or an equivalent support to it. Which is interesting. I think if it does the benefits like you outlined of increased privacy, and being able to do some of the offline receiving and all of those things, which is like again, it's the reason you can do offline receiving is there's no large technology advancement. It's just a custodian holding your funds for you until you want to do something with it. But I think ultimately being able to uh, incorporate more services on top of Cashew and stuff, I think is cool. I think that some people will probably, find this very interesting, especially inside of the Nostr ecosystem. Like you said, I think it's very focused on that. I can see a lot of people finding this beneficial inside of that. So, if you're I can't remember, Ben Carmen did a post a while ago around like what percent of like Nostr zapping is custodial, which was a very, very high percent. And so if you're going to do, a custodial experience inside of Nostr, this might be a better way than just using like a pure play custodian. So something for people to research, but it's great that ultimately we have these kinds of different options for people to use in advancing kind of in the compatibility across the ecosystem.
Nice. Well, cool. So yeah, that'll be interesting to test. I know Nate will probably be testing that pretty quick on our team. But cruising along here, this was not even on my radar. I know it's an event that's 10 years old, it sounds like, but the Satoshi Roundtable in Dubai, sounds like, layer twos was the hot subject. What Fred Krueger was sharing here, and Munib was diving into a quick breakdown. And I thought his bulleted list was pretty concise and just kind of made it easy to jump off. But 5 layer 2 projects were there. A lot of, sounds like conversation of BitVM, leveraging it for a trustless movement into layer 2s. And sounds like a lot of investment going into Bitcoin layer 2s. But yeah, I'm really curious some of your thoughts on this. And just, it sounds like the competitiveness heating up in Bitcoin layer 2s.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Satoshi Roundtable is definitely a great. I've personally never heard really great things about it, but yeah, it's going on for a long time, and it's basically kind of meeting of the minds in a lot of different ways around Bitcoin and Bitcoin related topics. But yeah, it sounds like I've heard several different accounts of kind of the takeaways from it. It sounds like it was a very good event and very focused on layer 2s, like you said, which is great. I think that it shows like the demand for people want Bitcoin, and they really want to be able to do things on Bitcoin, which is, to us, it's obvious, but I think to just broaden that out to like everyone, it's like the demand for Bitcoin is very real. And we see that by the development of all of these people trying to solve problems on top of Bitcoin. So I think it's one complete validation for Bitcoin, and that people desire it. They're not sufficient. The services that people like Ethereum or Solana or things provide are not sufficient. People are still looking for ways that they can do things on top of Bitcoin because they desire Bitcoin, the asset, from the onset. So point number one, I think that's like very, very a big deal to kind of think about here. Then going into there's a lot, layer 2s were kind of the hot topic of the event, which is no surprise, I would say. I think that there's a lot of people trying to crack a few different like kind of things inside of Bitcoin. So whether it's full EVM compatibility or just having better scalability, less interactivity, all these different things that people are trying to solve inside of layer 2s on Bitcoin to ultimately give it more functionality so you can do more things with Bitcoin, and also just making the user experience better. So like Lightning is aiming to solve like the instant settlement, low transaction fees, which comes with the requirement of interactivity today. Maybe that changes over time, but people trying to solve different areas. So a lot of things happening inside of the layer 2 space, which we're going to get into some of those as well. I think BitVM is very interesting. So I think it's complete validation, I would say, for Bitcoin itself, is the amount of people that are looking to build on it. And I think that ultimately there's going to be really interesting to see what kind of comes out of these things. And maybe there's 5 layer 2 projects today. How many will be there next year? And what kind of sticks and what doesn't. Feels very much like this early days of experimentation and figuring out what is going to be the thing that ultimately kind of takes hold.
Is there like a rough definition of layer 2? Because I feel like sometimes side chains might get called layer 2, where layer 2 is like actually layer 2. Could you touch on that?
I don't think there's a hard definition to it. I'm sure some people think that there is a hard definition to it, but words get used very, very fluidly around the ecosystem, where like people say like Liquid is a layer 2. Well, it's really like a side chain, or it's its own blockchain that is like can be tied to Bitcoin and things like that. So ultimately, there's no one strict definition of a layer two. I think ultimately when people say layer two is they're aiming to solve things with Bitcoin that are not directly maybe on top of Bitcoin, or they use Bitcoin in a way to accomplish, a further goal or something like that. So layer twos is a very broad term, and I'm sure you talk to different people, they're all going to give you a different answer on what that is.
Yeah. And that segues into one of our other topics. Citria here, like Bitcoin's first ZK rollup. And in this blog, it was announced just a little earlier today, it looks like. But when you scroll down and read deeper into the blog, it just talks about comparing side chains to layer twos that settle on chain. And forgive me for not being technical, but the gist was we want to have things built on layer twos that always come back and settle on chain, because by not doing so and building other things like side chains, it reduces the demand for Bitcoin block space. And we should always be, from this group's opinion, always be building where it's always forcing and making it more resilient, where we use it in the proper way and bring data to the chain in the best way. And I can understand that stance, but I also understand the stance of side chains where, both matter. But I kind of liked their framing where they were just talking about like certain proposals don't scale Bitcoin, and by leveraging rollups, we always are focused on these new solutions scaling Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, this is interesting. It did, I think, just come out today, so I still have a lot of research to do on it. But ultimately, I think I'll try and take kind of like a neutral stance. I think ultimately, this is very interesting. There, like we just talked about, there's a lot of people trying to solve like kind of these types of problems inside of Bitcoin. I think that ultimately we're going to see a lot of different kinds of solutions, and it's going to be challenging to judge them based on like marketing material like this, because ultimately maybe it does the things that are promised in this blog post, but then, what are the trust trade-offs? Like, where does it, what is the interactivity of it? All these different things that we're going to have to kind of evaluate and figure out, maybe this solves a particular area super well and it still has problems in a different area. So there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to need to do to kind of figure out what makes the most sense. And ultimately it comes down to user adoption of, the users of the world are going to flock to whatever, they demand, whether, the easiest, the most cost effective, all those different things. And so I think this is interesting. Like there's been an increasing amount of posts like this in the last like couple weeks. I think the interesting part about this is they do reference that they are using BitVM, which does seem interesting. The BitVM, there's no like technically BitVM team, but like Super Testnet, one of the kind of creators of like the white paper of BitVM, says that he doesn't know anything about this. He hasn't like interacted with the team. He doesn't know of anyone that's actually building anything on BitVM yet. So I think that this is exciting to see from, the kind of proof of concept idea and ways that, things can be applied. I think it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out and like how does it get created? What are the trust models? All of these different things. And, I think that it's great to see a lot of this kind of experimentation and ideation, like I mentioned. It's going to be really interesting to see how it kind of plays out as well when we get it into a usable kind of version and then getting it into the hands of the users and then see kind of where it takes from there. Because I think that's one of the problems we have in Bitcoin is we're building some like really fascinating things, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to how can people use it? What is the real world kind of adoption of it? And like, sure, this isn't kind of even has a usable product yet, but ultimately that's going to be the deciding factor is, will people use it? Is it a good experience to use? And a lot of these things it's just too early to know. So I think that that's what I'm kind of, interested in seeing how these things play out.
Yeah, good point. I always like your unbiased take, middle of the ground. I think that's a good way to approach these things. Well, all right, our last topic here. This is pretty sweet. LN Markets, they announced DLC market. So this allows you to do derivative trading where you maintain custodianship of your funds, it sounds like. And tons of money circulates across derivatives and a lot of these like complex trading tools. And it's pretty cool to see that they're bringing this to market. They got a white paper out, but this was announced this week. And I know LN Markets, they've had some tremendous growth, it looks like, over this last year. lots of people using their product, and it seems like they've done a wonderful job executing. So it's cool to see them step out and do something else new here.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think yes, Ellen Markets has done, fantastic. It seems from the basically what they share kind of publicly on Twitter and whatnot. But definitely exciting to see this kind of evolve into DLCs. We covered DLCs I think a little bit last week in like the 10-10-1 announcement. So it's great to see people continuing to push on DLCs and create services like this. So this is a great example of being able to do derivatives in a more non-custodial way, or at least trust minimized way. So I think that's going to be very, very exciting to see. And ultimately, these are things that also, things like BitVM and whatnot are kind of, I don't know if they're solving the exact same problem, but basically making it so you can interact with things in the world without giving up full control and custody, which is, you think about traditional finance. There's no other option than giving up full control all the time. You have to keep your money in a bank. You have to use this exchange or this provider or whatever. And there's no middle ground. And so, Bitcoin was created to kind of give people the opportunity to have control over their assets. But the problem historically has been, well, as soon as you want to do something with it, like trade or do derivatives, any of those things, you have to give up control again to enable those kinds of services. We're reaching this point where people are trying to solve the problem of you can still access those services, but not have to give up full control over your funds, which is very, very exciting. I think that's going to be very promising over time, is the ability for people to maintain control and have access to these different kinds of services. So, I think that, early on DLC markets is probably, going to be great for, playing around. But like, think about like when it reaches like a larger scale, where some large financial institution is doing large scale trading, and they would love to have control of their funds. It's just and it's not practical today. But you can see where this would go in the long run if it kind of becomes easy to use and really accessible and all these things. I think the opportunity is very, very large.
Yeah. I could be wrong here, but just like kind of slightly speculating on the future, it seems like a lot of Bitcoin today is used for store value. And as it does get moved into these different tools or ways and functions in which we use it, where it has to have extremely high velocity, it feels like the security for storage is just going to improve. And I know that we've got, multi-sig collaborative custody. You can do multi-sig by yourself. And now, like Unchained's doing, where there's like multiple key holders, that reduces the risk where you're not holding all the keys yourself with one other person. I think as more of these tools come out, there's got to be other creative ways to manage security that we're not even thinking about today. And it just has to do with the velocity of how like an individual or a business is choosing to use money, because a hot node obviously isn't great. Like, and I'm really curious, like, is there anyone working or talking about that yet? Like, that you're privy to?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is people working on things like that, and I think ultimately it goes into like, I think the theme of this episode in Bitcoin as a whole for like 2024 is a lot of people kind of pushing the envelope, doing things that were not possible before, or at least have recently discovered opportunities to do those kinds of things. So I think that there's a lot of people eyeing solutions like that, because that's like I said, I think that people want to. If you have the opportunity to give up control of your money or not give up control of your money, no one wants to give up control. It's just always been a necessity. And so as soon as we start pushing into that not being a necessity, that opens up a huge amount of opportunity for millions, billions of people. And so I think that there's a lot of people that recognize that. Maybe I say a lot, relatively speaking, it's probably a small number compared to like the size of the world. But I think people realize that, and they're working on solutions to enable that, because they see the opportunity that is massive to actually enable, services like that.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I saw a few people on the timeline say Bitcoin's been a little boring this last week. The price is slow, ETFs kind of tamed down, but it feels very exciting with a lot of this news. There is a lot of development, and I know we often get caught up in the price, but our little pet rock is chugging along and doing quite well, it feels like. So
yeah, no, it is. I think that this year, I think 2024 will be a very interesting year from a lot of these kind of new projects coming online, and then hopefully getting into somewhat of a usable state. And then maybe 2025 will be, assuming that some of those like take off and get use, like I think that it'll be a very very big year from there. So I'm really excited to kind of keep track and continue to watch these things and see how they progress.
Yeah. Well, great. I think that's about it from us, guys. But we'll be back next Tuesday, same time. If there's any topics you want to see covered, let us know. But as always, feel free to dive in the chat, share your feedback, ask questions. We love seeing everyone show up and engage. But we'll be back next week. And Graham, appreciate your time as always.
Yeah, thanks.